Welcome to another videos of Francois Ventures into Awakening. Today, we will explore how I currently feel about my spirituality state. As I mentioned in my previous video, this channel has two purposes. The first one is to potentially benefit others by sharing my awakening experiences. The second purpose is for me to record my spiritual state to help me connect with the source or self. I hesitated for a few months before deciding to finally record my spiritual growth in writing. This hesitancy stems from my observation of several situations in which spiritual leaders and teachers made it abundantly evident that the teachings, books, and notes that we usually gather along the way to spiritual enlightenment mainly interacts with the ego. To me, Papaji summarized this concern the best when he said the following.
All your books, all the time lost in learning different languages. Are they any use for conversing with the Atman, with the self, for speaking to yourself? None of that leads anywhere useful. The Atman has nothing to do either with books, or with languages or with any scripture whatever. It is, and that's all.
I totally agree with what Papaji said. On the other hand, I believe that in order to access the self, the ego needs to be aligned or trained as a cooperative interface to the self, or else the ego can easily obscure the self. Unless you have experienced some kind of ego death, an interesting subject that I will address in a future video. It is this belief of ego alignment requirement that convinced me to write down my spiritual experiences and share them on this channel. We are over 8 billion people on this planet, and that number does not include any of the other life forms present on this earth. Although there are countless reasons why every one of us is unique, I believe that there are two fundamental processes that underlie all of these differences. The first process is that the brain learns and develops by continuously experiencing or recording the inputs from our body 5 sensory systems, what can be called the training data. Evidently, everyone experiences different training data due to social and physical environments, location on the planet, period of existence, and many more reasons. For members of the same family, the differences in the training data are probably somewhat small, or at least in the same neighborhood, while the differences of the training data can be monumental for people living in different countries, cultures, social classes. The second process is how the brain itself processes this training data, the brain being the processing machine. All of our brains have the same fundamental construction or capacity, but how the neurons' final interactions or connections are made will be different from one brain to the other. I have observed on a few occasions that two people can be in the same place at the same time and experience the identical sensory inputs, yet they would draw rather different conclusions about what transpired. It is not that one person is correct and the other is wrong. It is simply that they have different brain with different interpretation, and we need to respect that fact. Similarly, as far as spirituality is concerned, we are all at different stages of awakening. Depending on the book or theory or spiritual teacher or spiritual leader, the number of stages can vary widely. As I mentioned before, there is no correct or wrong answer, it all depends on your brain and history. Personally, I prefer to use the term levels instead of stages, and I believe there are 3 levels of awakening. Level 0 is when you have no idea of what awakening is or even interested by it at all. In other words, you are fully immersed in the illusion by the ego. This is the level that I experienced the first 58 years of my life, and the level at which much of the population is currently. Level 1 is the very beginning of awakening, where you sense or know there is something more to this life than just the material world. This is the level that I am currently at. I can observe my thoughts, and I can stop my thinking for short periods of time, although sometimes I have difficulties to do so. Note that this awakening seems to really be a process that requires practice. At the beginning I could only stop my thoughts barely for a few seconds at a time. Now I can stop my thoughts for slightly longer time, but I have not reached the minute mark yet. Part of the problem is probably my ego that is watching my spiritual progress too close and somewhat interfering with it. Some people call this interference by the ego, the spiritual ego. What I have also observed is that a lot of people, who are not identified as spiritually oriented people, seems to be around level 1 or at least behave that way. I have seen numerous videos of various life coaches, inspirational speakers, therapists, and more that gives general life advice that resonates extremely well with spirituality. This, for me, kind of show that spirituality is innate or intuitive for humans, even if they are not aware of it. How much and how did they acquire that knowledge is obviously different from everyone, but in general I would say they simply use their common sense. Level 2 is the awakened people. These people are infrequent in the population and typically are the one that turn into spiritual teacher, leader or guide. There are quite a few on YouTube. I do not pretend to have seen them all or even tried to identify all of them, but here are a few of my favorites that I found. Eckhart Tolle, Louise Kay, Angelo DeLullo, Rupert Spira, Bo Norton, Elizabeth Hancock, Julia Non-Duality, Sam Gao, Sadhguru, Teal Swan, Julia Christina, and Muji. If you are not familiar with any of them, please take the time to visit their respective channels and I am sure you will find something helpful or at least interesting. There are also multiple older spiritual leaders that were from the pre-internet age and therefore do not seem to have a specific YouTube channel of their own, but older recordings of them made for TV or radio can be found on various YouTube channels. Those are Alan Watts, Papaji, Neville Goddard, Krishnamurti, among many others. Also, let not forget to mention the writings of stories, legends and scriptures that have been around for hundreds or even thousands of years that are found all around the world. By the way, on a side note, I think that giving a centralized point of access from the comfort of your own home to information that would be otherwise disparate and difficult to find, is the beauty of YouTube. Note that for any information that you get or find anywhere, it is up to you to decide or evaluate how this information is truly relevant for you personally and if you should ignore it or not. As I explained in the previous slide, we are all different with different history, so things that are true for someone can be false for someone else and nobody is necessarily wrong. Even if everyone's ego will disagree with this last statement. In conclusion, it is worth mentioning that spirituality is a process. Even if you think that you are at a certain level or stage, you can momentarily revert to a lower level or stage because of the ego reactivity that can be sometimes surprising and violent. It is also vital that you persist and continue your spiritual quest for the betterment of yourself and indirectly humankind. Once again, thank you for watching this video until the end. As always, please click the like button and subscribe to my channel if you find this video interesting and would like to see others like it. Also please add any comments or suggestions below. See you next time.